A few weeks ago, I accidentally poked the bear and talked about starvation mode in the sense of like, if you're not providing your body with enough calories, your body will go into starvation mode by holding on to all the fat because it thinks you're starving. Thus not being able to properly lose weight if that's what you're even after in the first place. That's what I've been told my whole life. Right? Like, that's just like what I've always heard. So that's what I said. And then this many people came for me for it. So I was like, okay, I'm always looking to learn. I never want to misinform. I did a little research. I straight up Googled, is starvation mode real? And this is as of June 13th, 2023. It says starvation mode is real, but it's not as powerful as some people think. It can slow weight loss over time, but it won't cause you to gain weight despite restricting calories. I basically Googled the same question again. Just worded it differently. I said, is starvation mode a myth? And it says starvation mode is a misleading term. So very fair. The question right underneath that, does the body really go into starvation mode? It says starvation mode is a not quite accurate name for the normal process the body goes through when adapting to weight loss. It's common for weight loss to stall, and it's even possible to experience some weight regain. So I'm basically still not very clear on it. Is it real? Is it not? Let's talk about it in the comments. Doctors, nutritionists, I would love to hear from you.
And people talked about it in the comments. We have someone who says, I think that only happens initially, but if you keep up the lower calorie intake, that becomes your body's new normal. And someone else says, ask the starving children in Africa.
Hey y'all, come look at this.
And another user says, you need to look at actual scientific literature, not random websites, because I also noticed the same thing when she was Googling. She got her answers from websites such as Healthline, and she also got her answers from another website. This was, okay, yeah, it doesn't look like it's the finding from a scientific study. Of course, blogs can always summarize what they have found in research findings, but it's usually better to go straight to the research findings and understand how people actually undertook that research, the methods they used, who are the respondents, what were the results, how did they analyze the results. It's actually better to get your information that way. Blogs are okay, they can summarize information for you, but to get the actual answers, it's better to look at their references and look at their resources and go to those sites and look for the actual studies, which we will do later in this video. And in her response to the person who told her to go and look at the actual literature, she said, agreed. My point, however, is that if the answer was as obvious as they made it seem, it would have easily come up in a Google search. I wouldn't have to look further or deeper for a basic answer. But I think that when it comes to scientific questions, the answers are never basic. They're never that straightforward. There are nuances to consider, which is why it's always better to look at the research findings, because blogs will summarize, and if you're just reading the summary, you might not get the actual answer because it's nuanced. The next comment says, I don't understand how I'm still fat when all I ate for 2 years was a piece of garlic bread, if even that. If this person is seriously eating garlic bread, just a piece of garlic bread for 2 years, I'm also still surprised that they are fat. I would like to see how big that size of garlic bread is, because sometimes people say that they're only eating a little, and then when you see that little, it's actually a lot. I would like to see how big that piece of garlic bread is. And we have someone who says, as someone who dealt with a slight ED, it's not real. Losing weight will always be less calories in than out. It can lead to weight gain if it leads to binging, that is overeating again, but no, it's not real. And we will also get to that in this video, and I'll share just one more comment which says, it's definitely real and it happened to me. I ate 1,200 calories for months and I held on to body fat. I also always felt weak and starving, losing pretty fast at 1,600 calories now. That's interesting, wouldn't you say so? I first came across the term starvation mode some time back when I was doing my research on fat acceptance and held at every size movements, which is something that I covered in a previous video. And I have to say that the discussions centering around starvation mode were quite entertaining. On one side, we had fat acceptance and Haes activists who were so convinced that starvation mode was so real that they were scared to try a calorie deficit because they might starve. And on the other side, I came across so many health and wellness influencers who thought that starvation mode was a cope. Even now, as you have seen in that video and in her comment section, these discussions are still taking place. And I will share both sides of these discussions on this video. But that said, who is right according to the science? You know, if we go deeper than a Google search, if we go into the research findings, who is actually right? Hello everyone, and welcome or welcome back I am Daisy, aka D, and I make weekly videos about weight loss beliefs that often complicate weight loss for women and make it harder for them to achieve the results that they want. So if that sounds like something that you would be interested in, I would love to have you join our community. That said, let's get into a discussion for the day, and that is the idea that being in a calorie deficit can put you in starvation mode. Also, if you can hear some drilling, there's construction going on, and I couldn't delay the video any further, so we are going to have to work with that noise for now. So let's see some of the discussions surrounding starvation mode.
Are you struggling to lose weight despite eating less? Let's talk about why. I'm Dr. Caroline. Today we're discussing starvation mode and how it can actually lead to more weight gain. When you eat too little, your body becomes starved, slows down your metabolism to conserve energy, and this means you will burn fewer calories, making weight loss actually harder.
Things I wish I knew before I started losing weight. Starving yourself will not going to help you to lose weight. You're going to get yourself in starvation mode and your body's not going to lose weight.
See, these are some of the videos that I found. There's this idea that starvation mode exists. In fact, when that second creator gets questioned about her stance on starvation mode, with someone saying that starvation mode is not a thing, she replies, read about it. And someone seconds her and says, it 100% is. Your metabolism slows down so much. And since she tells the person behind the comment to go and read about it, let's do the same thing and get into the research. What comes to your mind when you think of starvation? Well, as someone from Kenya, which is a country in East Africa, starvation is not something that we take lightly. After all, due to famines and drought in the arid and semi-arid regions in our country, we have lost many people to starvation. These people have had so little food available to them that their bodies have depleted all their energy stores, and this has led to very, very horrible deaths. I know that sounds very grim, but that is what starvation means to us. It is a real fear for very many families, and not just in Kenya, but also in other places where drought and famine or even lack of access to food for any other reason. But in diet culture, as well as the movements that push back on dieting, starvation mode is used to refer to a stage in which your body weight plateaus because you have cut back your calories too much, as you might have seen from those examples. And in this state, apparently your body stops losing weight, and instead it starts holding on to fat because it fears that it is going into starvation. People tend to believe in the idea behind starvation mode because they have seen, or perhaps even experienced, cases where people have dieted hard and have not seen the results that they wanted, and so they start thinking that there's a point at which their body shuts down and starts fighting back. And this belief is further compounded by movements such as fat acceptance and health at every size. In these circles, women often talk about the dangers of dieting, and they look at calorie deficits as dangerous because they are essentially equal to starving. Of course, there is the other end of this spectrum when it comes to EDs, and we will also talk about that because yes, some people do push their calorie deficits to the extreme to a point where it becomes problematic for their health, and not just physically but also mentally. But now that we understand where the idea behind starvation mode comes from, is it real? As far as dieting goes, starvation mode in itself is a myth. Now, if you're talking about people living without food, such as people who live in drought-stricken areas, as well as people who are struggling with EDs, then that is another case. But when it comes to typical dieting, starvation mode does not exist. Now, you'll probably be asking why. To start with, our bodies have been designed to survive famine, which is something that they have done over the centuries, which is why we are still here. And that means when they do not have enough access to food, they know how to conserve energy. But now, moving away from famine and drought and lack of access to food, what about typical dieting? What happens when it comes to weight loss? Do these mechanisms kick in? Not at all. While there's this idea that these biological adaptations can keep us from losing weight, the truth is that when you consistently consume fewer calories than you burn, your body will lose weight, and that is the long and short of it. However, it is important for us to note how different calorie deficits impact our weight loss journeys. In cases where you cut your calories by a large degree, let's say you're cutting back 25 to 30% of your calories, which is considered moderate in most circumstances. For example, if you consume 2,000 calories to maintain your weight and you cut back by 25 to 30%, we're talking about a cut of at least 500 calories per day, which is a lot. Over time, your body goes through a process known as metabolic adaptation, and it does this so as to conserve energy. After all, you're not eating enough to fuel your daily needs, and so it just finds ways to conserve energy to make up for this deficit. So it is quite possible that we'll notice effects such as more fatigue and irritability, less ability to engage in non-essential activities, a lower resting metabolic rate, and higher hunger hormones. It's actually quite normal to feel ravenous when you're on a calorie deficit because your hunger hormones actually increase during this time. These factors, when combined, make it a bit harder for you to lose weight, but they do not stop weight loss in entirety. For example, you may find that you're hungrier than usual, and that could encourage you to start eating larger amounts of food or even more frequently. But while your body may try to conserve energy or try to get you to eat more food so as to make up for the deficit, the truth is that you can still lose weight if you remain in the calorie deficit, if you're not giving in to these urges to eat more food, or you're not giving in to the urge to just lay down all day and do nothing because you're feeling fatigued, if you just keep doing what you need to do to remain in that calorie deficit, you will lose weight. That is it. Like the next creator explains, what people think is starvation mode is actually metabolic adaptation. I will allow her to give her take on this.
Understand that social media has brainwashed you into thinking that if you go deep enough into a calorie deficit, that your body goes into starvation mode, and that is the reason that you can no longer continue to lose weight, but that's not it. Your body is very, very smart, so it's going to do this fun thing called metabolic adaptation, where it is going to continue to burn less and less calories so it can attempt to preserve itself. It will shut down different processes in your bodies, things will start to slow down, aka your digestion will start to slow down. Your body doesn't want to be in a calorie deficit and lose fat, your body wants to stay alive. So yes, it's very possible that your metabolic rate has slowed down, but I promise you, you're just no longer in a calorie deficit. 90% of the time when somebody tells me that they're not seeing any more weight loss, they're either not in a calorie deficit because their metabolism has adapted, and or they are having little bites and little free things, and they're having way more free meals than they're leading me on to think. When you have a lot of weight to lose, there's a lot of room to play. When you start having less weight to lose, there's less room to play.
That's quite true about having little room to play when you're trying to lose a small amount of weight. I've been trying to cut back my body fat percentage, and that requires me to lose about 1 to 2 kilograms of fat, and that's going to take longer than it will for me to lose more weight. Your body just finds ways to conserve energy. It's still possible. You just need to be a bit more patient. So now we know what happens when you cut your calories by about 25 to 30%. How about if you cut even more calories? If you cut your calories to the extreme by adopting a deficit of 40% or more of your daily calories, your body shuts down even more processes to survive. As such, in addition to the side effects that I had mentioned before, you are likely to experience additional problems such as a loss of muscle, which is especially common when your protein intake is low, nutrient deficiencies because it's going to be much harder for you to fit all the nutrients that you need in such a deficit, and a higher likelihood of binge eating because your hunger hormones will actually be much higher. You find that in such a deficit, your body fights you harder in order to conserve energy, and these effects can pave the way for lower fat loss rates. I'm not saying that weight loss is going to be impossible, but if you're struggling with all of these effects, it's going to be much harder for you to continue on that calorie deficit consistently. Interestingly, these side effects can also pave the way for weight gain. For example, if you feel so restricted that you end up binge eating almost every weekend, you could very well eat back your calorie deficit, which is something that many people do. They are good during the week or even for a whole month or something, and then they go through this period where they're just eating at a surplus, so much so that they just eat back their entire deficit. But in all these cases, whether you're cutting your calories by 30%, 40%, 50%, you're still going to be subject to the laws of thermodynamics. And this dictates that as long as you're consistently in a calorie deficit, you will lose weight. On the flip side though, extreme calorie deficits are not only very hard to maintain, but they can also pave the way for health issues. So we need to talk about that before we move on to what we can do to get out of this starvation mode. So far, we have talked about what happens when we're in a reasonable calorie deficit, as well as what happens when we push things too far. But what happens when we remain in an extreme calorie deficit for a long period, whether it's weeks, months, or years? This is when we get into the ED territory. Seeing as this is not my forte, I will allow this creator to explain the signs that this is what could be happening to you.
How do you know if your body is in starvation mode? I'm going to give you 7 signs to know if your body is being deprived. Number 1 may seem obvious. It is a significant amount of weight loss in a short period of time. It's a sign your body's not getting enough. 2 is extreme hunger or intense urges to eat. Number 3 is fatigue or weakness. You feel tired often or you just feel weak. And 4 is irregular or absent menstrual cycles. Number 5, mood swings where you go from high to low or impatient or irritable. Sign number 6 is your hair's falling out, brittle nails or dry skin. And then sign number 7 is you have a decreased body temperature, something that you can track. Okay, 7 signs. If several of these are present, I recommend talking to your doctor or especially talking to a therapist about an eating disorder.
She specializes in ED recovery, and I think that when it comes to that, it's best to talk to a professional. In response to her video, we have someone who says, I am 35 and only just coming to terms with the fact that I have an ED. I don't even know where to start with recovery. And someone else asks, can you tell me why I see my sternum after 4 days? I'm going to insert a picture of the sternum here. When it comes to this first comment, we can see that she's struggling with an ED. And yes, that's what happens when you push your calories to the extreme. Of course, it's not as simple as that. EDs are not just about calorie deficits. It's a mental challenge for people who are going through such situations because many people use EDs as a form of self-control. And it's not as simple as they're just trying to lose weight. It's more than that. There's always something else going on. And so if you think that you or someone else could be pushing things to the extreme, I would advise you to seek the help of a mental health professional. Of course, if you have those signs, it will also mean that you might be sick and you might not really have an ED, but whatever is going on, it's very important to get the help that you need because you probably need medical help. But like I said, that's not my forte, so we're going to move back to what I really know. And let's talk about what you can do to avoid getting into this phase where you feel like you're in starvation mode and you're not seeing the weight loss progress that you want. Luckily for everyone trying to lose weight, studies have shown that starvation mode does not prevent weight loss, and that the laws of physics will always reign supreme. However, eating too few calories comes with several downsides. Not only can it slow down your metabolism, but it can also increase your hunger levels, and it can harm your health through effects such as the loss of muscle and nutrient deficiencies. So even though you can lose weight using aggressive approaches, there is more to consider beyond weight, and it's important to think about your health. I would recommend that you adopt a slight to moderate calorie deficit, which averages 10 to 20% of your daily calories, what you need for your total daily energy expenditure. So let's say you consume around 2000 calories to maintain your current weight. That would mean cutting about 200 calories, and then if you're going for 20%, that will be 400 calories. So 200 to 400 calories, that is more sustainable, and it's more enjoyable because you don't really feel ravenous, you don't really feel like there's this really big change that is happening, and you still get to lose weight. Simply put, it gives you the better and healthier chance at losing weight without depriving yourself. If you would be interested in working with me to achieve this balance, you can find a link in the description where you can learn more about my Better in 90 program, which was designed to help women lose weight and keep it off sustainably. And we use approaches that do not put a strain on your physical or mental health, which is what enables you to build a lifestyle that you can adopt for decades and decades. Like with many things, the slow and steady approach is the best way to go about losing weight. Let me know what you think about starvation mode and whether you have ever felt stuck in your journey. Also, give this video a thumbs up if it cleared things up for you, and hit subscribe so that you can join us on next week's meet. I will see you in the next one.